Hey everyone, it's Alex, and today I'm here with my continued book haul from 2021 and 2020. Basically all the books that you can see in this frame to my right are books I have to haul. This stack, these two, this whole entire shelf, and then I got another like 3 stacks on my floor that I couldn't fit in the frame. So there's a lot to get to today. I counted them. Unlike last time, I was like, let's know how many books I have to get through in this video. It's 110, you know, plus or minus. I am not good at math, so my counting is iffy. Iffy counting skills. About 110. I don't even know what to say to that. I had a lot of books. And I already got through like 60 or 70 of them in the last video, so I don't really know how I have another 110 books to get through. I apologize, my little spleen demon is running around everywhere, being a spleen demon. She'll probably run through the frame, I'm sure, at some point. This is going to be a long video. If you plan to watch the whole thing, I recommend getting snacks and drinks now. It's gonna be a long one, because I am determined to get through all of these books. There's not going to be a third one of these because I'm too tired. I will link the other video, the first video, down below, but like they have nothing to do with each other. They're just book hauls. But if you missed that one and you're interested in seeing another 70 books that I bought in the last year and a half, please go watch it. It took like 2 hours of my life. Well, it took like 6 hours of my life if you add in all the editing time, because lengthy. I'm just gonna get into this in the hopes that this will not be a 4-hour video and maybe something closer to like a 2-hour video. I'm starting with my left since that's already out of the frame, and then working right. That's the plan. It's a great plan. First book I read. Why am I acting like this is a useful video? I haven't read any of these. The first book to talk about is Rizzolian Isles. I can't even just begin this video, okay? Oh my god, please stop. This is just gonna be a wreck of a video. The Surgeon by Tess Gerritsen. This is the book, or the first book in the series that the TV show Rizzolian Isles was based off of. My best friend and I watched that. My best friend and I really liked that show. We watched it all until it ended, and I was really interested in the books. I heard from someone, I forget who, that they really liked the books, and I figured I would try one, like the first one, in case I do really like it, then I can like continue on with the series. So yeah, I got the first one, and I'm looking forward to reading it. The second book, also a thriller, Red Dragon by Thomas Heiress. I bought Silence of the Lambs a while ago. That was in a different book haul that I did, and meant to read it. Looked at it and realized that was not the first book. I just assumed that was the first book because that's the more famous movie. I think that was the first movie. So I got that one, and then I realized that Red Dragon was actually the first book. So yeah, I got it so that I can read Silence of the Lambs, but hopefully I enjoy both of them. Only Daughter by Snoekstra. This is something I don't remember at all. Okay, essentially a teenage girl goes missing, and like a decade later, a woman shows up pretending to be her, but all is not what it seems within the family, and I feel like the family probably killed the teenage girl, or someone in the family did. So that's the vibe I get from this book, but it's a thriller, and there's an episode of SVU that had this premise. Probably more than one episode, to be perfectly honest. But I've read this premise a few times, or I've watched it in different cop shows, and I always kind of like it. I like the post-kidnapping drama. Like, the person returns home, regardless of whether or not they actually, like, are the person. But, I don't know. It was just, like, a thriller I grabbed. The Distant Hours by Kate Morton. Again, I'm pretty sure I bought this just because I recognized the author's name. I'm not entirely certain why. After reading the back, I'm still not entirely certain what this book is about. If I'm being honest, it's historical fiction set in the No, it's not historical fiction. Is it? I don't know. It seems like it's centered around the 40s, perhaps. But maybe it's like set in present day, kind of about what happened in the 40s. But basically, this woman's mother gets a letter like 50 years later, and she's trying to like, her mother's dead, I think, and she's trying to figure out her mother's past, perhaps. And there's like a castle, and I don't really understand. But yeah, apparently I thought it was interesting. I don't understand the plot reading the entire back summary, so that's fun. And it's a nice thick one. Hello, Spleen! She's such a demon. I don't care. It's fine. I'm sorry, Spleen. Then another thriller. I always say I don't get that many thrillers. She's happiest when she can just lay in a pile of books. She does this on purpose. Another thriller. I always say I need to stop buying thrillers because I tend to read thrillers once and not really love them and then unhaul them. So I do better getting them from the library. But I've heard great things about this one. The One by John Mars. What's her name? Snyderby Books. She read this and really loved it. And it sounded so interesting to me. It's essentially a soulmate alternate universe, and I love those. I'm sorry, I have the thinnest windows, so every time there's a car outside, y'all are just gonna hear it. It's a soulmate AU, but done in like a thriller way instead of like a romance or a drama way, which really intrigued me. And I just love soulmate AUs in general. Like, I always have. I've read a lot of them. Or I've not read a lot of them. I've never read one. But I've read like people's short stories that they posted online. And like there have been movies. And I don't know. It sounded really good. And it apparently deals with a couple of couples. No, it deals with 5 people. And it's like a soulmate AU. But what if it was a thriller? So I'm super stoked on this one. Another booktube recommendation, Ravishing the Heiress by Sherry Thomas. This was recommended by Literary Labors. I think she was talking about how it was her favorite romance novel. And I don't read a lot of romance novels. Like, kind of by design, but also just because, like, they're never something I really gravitate towards. But I do like reading the occasional one. And since she talked about how good this one is, it made me really interested in it. And I don't think I've read a romance novel quite like this. It's like there's an arranged marriage and she's going to be a countess by marrying an earl, and he gets her wealth and like drama. It's very sensible, except she's in love with him, which like sounds lovely and like cheesy in the best possible way. So hopefully I really enjoy this one. It's a little outside my comfort zone, but I do like picking up romance novels sometimes. Not like tons, but I don't know, because Angie loved this one so much, I really wanted to try it. Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. I read... Ow, she's just attacking me down here. What did I read? American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld recently, and I loved it. It was so well done. It was essentially a fictionalized version of Laura Bush's life from her childhood up until her years as First Lady with Bush. I mean, fictional. It wasn't... the character's name was not Laura Bush, but it was very recognizable. And I loved it. I loved the writing style, and I loved how it was done, and just like the slow character study of it. It was so good. So I picked up 2 of Curtis Sittenfeld's books. The first was Rodham, which is, I think, an alternate history about Hillary Clinton. It's basically, what if she didn't marry Bill Clinton and lived her life? According to the brief skimming I just did. But it sounds interesting. I love Curtis Sittenfeld's writing, so I decided to pick this one up. And the other Curtis Sittenfeld book I got was You Think It, I'll Say It, which is short stories. I don't know anything about these. I just grabbed it because I really liked American Wife that much that I wanted 2 more of her books immediately. I don't really check out short story collections at all if I'm familiar with the author, because they're all so different that there's not really much of a point. Like, I don't know. So I don't know anything about this one, and I don't really care to. I just picked it up because Curtis Sittenfeld. Ohio by Stephen Markley. This was a recommendation from Brian from Bookish. He read this years ago at this point, but I remember he talked about it and it sounded really, really interesting to me, and I wanted to read it. It's basically about 4 classmates in 2013. 4 former classmates. They're all adults now. And I think it's like basically they're 10 years post high school or something. And they all go back to their hometown and like drama ensues. And it's a lot about like the time period in which they grew up in the early 2000s, according to like the brief summary I read, which again did not really explain the plot at all so much as it was talking about like the overarching themes of the book. Less helpful. Still sounds really interesting, but it means I can't tell you anything about it because I have no idea what the plot is. The Disenchantments by Nina LaCour. This is a YA novel about a boy whose best friend has a band, and he's planning, after they graduate high school, he's planning to go on tour with the band and her, and then she announces that she's going to go to college instead and kind of like abandons him a little bit. I don't know much about this book. The premise doesn't actually sound like something I would ordinarily pick up, but I really love Nina LaCour. She's one of my favorite authors. Like, We Are Okay is one of my favorite books of all time. It's just so gorgeous and beautiful, so I will read anything by her, and this was one of the books by her I hadn't gotten to yet, so really looking forward to this one, even if it sounds a little bit strange. It sounds a little bit like over the top and like melodrama, like her band is going on a tour around Europe. But I think it's, with Nina LaCour, she usually writes a lot more like, they might sound over the top, but the books wind up being very, very down to earth, which is very much my style. So I think I will love this, probably. I've loved everything she's written so far. Annihilation by VanderMeer. This has been talked to death on BookTube, I think. It's a science fiction novel. I can't tell you what it's about. I watched the movie a while ago, and I thought the movie was so beautiful. Couldn't tell you what the plot is, like not even remotely. So take that as you will. I heard the book is probably equally confusing. It's a trilogy, but I'm only committing to the first book now because strange science fiction is not necessarily my cup of tea. But I did think the movie was beautiful and it made me interested in the story, so I would like to try to get through it. And I've heard some people really, really loved it. I can't remember who on BookTube because I know it was like more than one, but it is quite beloved, I believe. Driving by Starlight by Anat Deracine. This I actually bought recently. It's about 2 girls in Saudi Arabia, 2 teenagers who kind of rebel in small ways against the Saudi cultural police, like Western clothing, music they're not supposed to listen to, and like driving. And it's just their story. It's not got a really long description, but I don't remember why this was on my TBR. I put it as on my want to read list on Goodreads like a long time ago, and I didn't remember it. But when I was looking, because I wanted to buy a couple of books, this caught my eye and sounded really interesting. This is just the video now. Just my tiny demon child and loud noises outside. Thank you, everyone. It's not like I'm just trying to film a video here. I don't remember if someone recommended me this or if I just came across it randomly, but it sounded good. The author grew up in Saudi Arabia. She lives in the US now, and it's a pseudonym. Okay. But it sounded really good and really interesting, so I picked it up. It's the rule of the book haul. You have to call every book really interesting, and they say that you want to read it, as though that's not like inherently assumed. Rust and Stardust by T. Greenwood. This is, I think, Lolita-esque. Yeah, this is Lolita. It's not Lolita. It's based on the person who I think Lolita was based on, and this is more specifically about her, ? I don't know, but it sounds really good. Emily from Books for Life read this again years ago, and it sounded so good, and it's been on my TBR since then, and I was just like really interested in it, and I've been thinking about it since she talked about it, and I just really wanted to read it, and it was like never available at my library. Like, my library doesn't have a copy, so I just went ahead and bought my own copy. I believe, I was gonna say it's YA, but I don't want to say that because I don't know, and it sounds like a vaguely adult topic. It's an ex-library copy, so I was trying to see if it said like YA somewhere, but I do not know. So we're just not going to give it an age range because I don't want to say it's YA, have it be like this really graphic adult book about rape, because that's essentially what it's about. But just from the moment she talked about this, I really, really wanted to read it. And it's been on my TBR, and it's been one of those books on my TBR that I didn't just put there and then kind of forget about. It's just been like sitting and ruminating in my mind, and I was eventually just like, I gotta go buy myself a copy. So stoked on this one. Again, it sounds very interesting. Once We Were Brothers by Ronald H. Balson. This is about World War II. It says it's the gripping tale of two boys, once as close as brothers, who find themselves on opposite sides of the Holocaust. I feel like that's basically all you need to know. A man accuses this respected civic leader and multi-philanthropist of being a former Nazi SS officer who was called like a butcher, you know, and like was the reason for massacres. And this man was like his brother basically, and like raised by his family, and I don't know, it sounds good. It just, in vague, I don't know any specifics. It's just, it's one of those books where you read the back and it's like, this kind of gives me like an idea of what it's going to be about, but like not really understanding the whole picture. So basic idea sounds really interesting and good to me. So we're just going with that. Oh my god, it's just like everything just fell apart. The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan. This I remember from my childhood. Not my childhood. When was this published? 2009. So like it came out when I was in middle school or high school. It's about this forest, and the fence protects the village from the forest, and you always have to like stay inside the village because otherwise you die. There's like a sisterhood, and she's learning secrets about it, and she has to figure out the truth about like, is the forest actually evil, or is it like her village that's evil and lying to them? I guess, I don't know. I remember this from when I was like 14 or something. I don't think I ever read it, but I remember it existing. It's apparently like a post-apocalyptic romance. It's elegantly written from title to last line, which I don't know if I would call The Forest of Hands and Teeth elegantly written, but sure. But I don't know, it was one of those books where like I saw it and I remembered it and I wanted it, and I don't exactly know why, because post-apocalyptic romance doesn't really sound like something I would want to pick up, but I really, really wanted it, so, you know. It's mine now, and I guess I will read it at some point within the next 5 to 20 years. Let's hope. These are just in a pile, so I'm picking them up, not knowing what I'm picking up. The Finishing School by Joanna Goodman. That backpack tells me nothing. It's 1998. Oh, a girl dies at a finishing school in 1998 in London. It says Europe. I don't know why Europe just means London in my head. Like, that doesn't make sense. Basically, this girl, I think she's a teenager, falls from a balcony and dies. And it's like, was it a suicide? Was she pushed because like people hated her? There's also like this secret society, and her best friend has like a lot of questions about it, and she's an adult now, and she goes back to like the 100th anniversary of the school, and she starts trying to figure out like what happened. I'm not entirely certain when I picked this book up I read anything at all about it. I think I was just like, sure, I'm down, because I got another book by that author too. I'd grab it, but I don't know where it is. It's all just a mess down here. Friday Night Lights by H.G. Bissinger. I don't know why I got actually I know why I got this book. I saw it like 6 times and I was like, I don't know if I want that book. I've never seen the movie. I watched a little bit of the show, but I stopped because I got bored and it was like a lot. And I just kept seeing this book and I was like, do I want it? Do I want it? And I was like, I don't think I do. But then I did, so I got it. I know it's like based on a true story, but I don't know if it's like a nonfiction book about that or if it's like a novel that's based on the true story. But I'm not really super familiar with it because all I've seen is the show, which I think is just absurdly, vastly different from anything about the book or like the real situation. But I know it's about like the most winning football team of all time who just like won games. Like I don't think they lost a game for like years and years and years. Yeah, that's pretty much all I know. I don't even know if I'm gonna like that book, so I don't care about football. I like sports, but like not football specifically. But I don't know. I gotta hurry up with this video. I'm like 30 minutes into filming time, and I have gotten through like 2.5 stacks of books, maybe. The One I Left Behind by Jennifer McMahon. The tagline is, "It's up to you to save me." Sounds like drama. Sounds like a thriller. The Summer of 1985. Interesting. Oh, I bought this recently. I bought this like 3 days ago, and I've already just completely forgotten that I got this book. Basically a serial killer is kidnapping women and killing them, and then her mother is kidnapped, but then there's no body, and the serial killer just like goes underground. And 25 years later, her mother's been found alive, and it's like, okay, what happened? So sounds like drama, sounds thrillery, and she's like trying to track down the serial killer, and sounds like I would really enjoy this potentially. Ophelia by Lisa Klein. This is a reimagining of Hamlet that focuses on Ophelia. She's ambitious for knowledge and witty and beautiful. She's forced to choose between her love for Hamlet and her own life. I know what she chooses in the play, but we'll see what she chooses here. I don't know. I think this looks like YA. I don't know that it is, but it looks like YA. And it looked good. It looked like something I wanted at that, yeah, it is YA. It looked like something I wanted at the exact moment in time that I saw it, so I got it. That's basically, half of these are not even like my kind of thing. Lost in the Forest by Sue Miller. Best-selling author of While I Was Gone. I bought this recently. I bought this like 3 days ago as well, and I've already forgotten it. This woman owns a small bookstore, and her second husband is killed in a car accident, and it's basically about her and her children and like the family story of like them going through the grief and potentially interesting. This book I was kind of split on whether it sounded like or good, and I decided to pick it up just in case it was good. I should be a little bit more discerning, but I am not. Marcus Zusak, Bridge of Clay. The breathtaking story of 5 brothers who bring each other up in a world run by their own rules. Yeah, the bag doesn't really tell you anything about the book. I read The Book Thief, and like, unpopular opinion, I thought it was fine. I don't think it was a favorite of mine. Like, so many people love that book, and I was just like, it's fine. Like, it's not bad. But I don't know. I didn't love it. So I don't know why I wanted this when I couldn't tell you a single thing that it was about, but I wanted it. So now I have it. I don't know why I do this. I have no standards. I just buy things. Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. I don't know what this is about. When I saw it, I bought it. I didn't read what was it about. I literally don't know what war. A transformative moment in American history. But it doesn't say what war, just that they're at war. Okay, that doesn't matter. It's apparently it has the atmosphere of a noir novel. It's a death-dazzling, propulsive exploration of a transformative moment in American history. Yeah, but I'd heard of this, and I kind of was always curious about it despite not knowing what it was about. So I kind of just was stoked to see it and decided I would get it. But I can't tell you a single, it doesn't even say on the back. I read the whole back and it doesn't say what war or what time period it's set in. Am I just supposed to know? Like, what year? Part 1, The Shore. Yeah, it really doesn't say, so I have no idea. But apparently, there's a war. Spleen has finally decided to rest. She's kind of just enjoying the sunshine right now, which thank God, because, honey, did you bin this book? She did. She bent the pages. You're so naughty. The City in the City by China Mieville. This was gifted to me, and it's apparently a favorite book. I haven't read the bag. I don't know what it's about. I think it's science fiction or dystopia. There's a murder. I like murder. Murder's fun. It apparently is about an inspector. He's the main character. And there's a border crossing. The journey is psychic. The journey is as psychic as it is physical. A seeing of the unseen. I don't know what that means. So, yeah, we'll read this. It sounds maybe interesting, but it also sounds like a lot. And I don't always do well when a book is like a lot, especially like sci-fi. But I also got Annihilation, and I assume this can't be weirder than that because I watched that movie and that was weird. I want to cry just looking at how many books I have left to haul here. Help me. Please send help. What is this? The Silent Ones by K.L. Slater. This I bought recently and I remember it, which I think is a good sign. It's about 2 little girls who are arrested for a terrible crime. And like the mothers, or at least the one mother, is like, how could this have happened? How could my child have done this? How could my sister's child have done this? Like, her life is ruined now. So I like books about kids who commit crimes. It's interesting. Because they're like 10 years old and I assume they commit murder. Oh yeah, they say that at the top, murder. So apparently her daughter commits murder. Or is accused, you know, it's a thriller. Maybe other things are going on. Perhaps, but I do really like that. I think it's interesting. I think books about children who commit crimes and do things are interesting. But again, I should buy fewer thrillers because usually I read them and then haul them immediately as trash. I mean, not trash, but like, I am very, very picky about books in general and especially thrillers. So I should just get them from the library. But the library doesn't have... Oh, she's asleep. My library doesn't have all the ones that I necessarily want. And yeah, Spleen's over there just like sleeping. And it's so cute. I want to die just looking at her. The Perfect Girl by Gilly McMillan. A 17-year-old musical prodigy with a genius IQ. Apparently she was in an accident that left some people dead. And she did time in jail, I think. And this is after that, and her mother dies one night, and there's an investigation, which I assume means her mother was murdered. So, again, thriller. I don't really care to know too much going into thrillers, just like the vague premise, but sounded interesting. This is a Lily King book, Euphoria. I don't know who Lily King is, but for whatever reason, I recognized her name, and I was like, I want that book. And it's apparently inspired by Margaret Mead, who was a revolutionary anthropologist. It's set in the 1930s. There's a passionate love triangle. It really doesn't tell you like much of anything on the bag. Like this little section here, this tiny paragraph, is the only description of the book that's there. But I wanted it. Don't know why. Don't know why I recognized her name. It's won awards. Like, I don't know. I wanted it. That's pretty much all I can tell you. Louise Penny, Still Life. It's a cop thriller. Thanksgiving weekend. That's exciting. It was just Thanksgiving. I don't really care. Oh, in Canada. Different Thanksgiving, I think. Yeah, it's just a cop thriller. I don't know. I don't really care. I picked it up because it was a cop thriller and I recognized her name. Don't know from what. I think she's just one of the... I worked in a bookstore. That's probably where I recognized her from. Just saw her name on the shelf and now I'm like, oh, I want that. Why? Don't know. What is this? Oh, First I Killed My Father by Long Ung. I watched this movie. It's about Cambodia. I mean, obviously it's about Cambodia, but in the 70s and the Khmer Rouge and Vietnam and like the genocide. That's the word I'm looking for. And it's like really horrifying. And I did enjoy the movie, but I was interested in like reading the book and what it was about, and I'm 90% sure I haven't read this. I have read about the Khmer Rouge before. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. She was a child soldier in a work camp for orphans. Some of her siblings went to labor camps. I think her parents were killed. ... question mark. I don't really remember, but I really wanted to read the book. Like, the movie is, I don't think the movie's really dramatized at all. Like, it is kind of, but it's mostly just trying to tell the story of this book. It's not trying to like be inspired by this book. It was trying to actually tell the story, but it is just different when you read things in like the nonfiction book form that they were originally in. And I've wanted to read this for a while. Falling Leaves by Adeline Yen Ma, the memoir of an unwanted Chinese daughter. This is a memoir, obviously. In China, she's the youngest daughter, and they're rich, but she experienced a lot of emotional abuse at the hands of her stepmother, and she moved from Hong Kong to England, the United States, became a physician and a writer, and I think it's just about like the abuse she suffered as a child, but it sounded interesting. I like memoirs, just like period, but like I like memoirs of like abuse as a child, and it's just like, it's described as a psychological drama, which sounds like almost offensive because like this is her real life, but yeah, I like memoirs in general. So, oh, the font in this is rough. I didn't look at the font. It's like kind of tiny. I mean, I just feel old saying that. I'm not that old, but it is just like real small font, questionably small. But I don't want to dwell on that because that makes me feel old. The Circle by Dave Eggers. I might have watched this movie. She goes to work for The Circle, which I'm pretty sure is Google, in a slightly more dystopic world. And it's basically just Google in a more slightly dystopic world, I think. But I might have seen the movie or part of the movie. Digital utopianism. The datification of our daily lives. It's a heart-racing novel of suspense. I think I saw at least part of the movie, and I think it was interesting, like in concept, but I don't think I liked the movie super much. But I'm interested in the book, and I know this was very popular on BookTube a while back, so I don't know. It's like not super my thing, but it's intriguing, sort of. We'll see. We shall see. I'll probably read that in 8 years and be like, it was fine. That's just the truth for most of these. The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. I'm just trying to figure out anything what these books are about. Set in 1985. Oh, about the AIDS epidemic. That's interesting. I'm just like learning about these books now. It's about a director of a Chicago art gallery. The AIDS epidemic, people around him die constantly, and the only person he has left is his little sister. And then like 30 years later, it's about his little sister who's tracking down her daughter who was in a cult. That's not exactly where I expected that description to go, but there it is. I think it's about both like the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and then like present day, reflecting on like her current life and dealing with the aftermath of the AIDS epidemic and how it affected her. So sounds really, really interesting and different. But I wasn't expecting that description to just go straight into cults, which, I mean, it's called The Great Believers, so I shouldn't have been that surprised, but I was still a little surprised. Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. This was described to me as Ready Player One, except good. I was not the biggest fan of Ready Player One. I didn't think it was great. I never finished it. I'm still like 2/3 of the way through. I was buddy reading it with Flora from Crazy Book Lady, and I never finished it. I just completely flaked out there for like a year and a half straight. But I do plan to finish it. I'm not DNFing it. It's just like on hold and has been for over a year now. But yeah, this was described to me as Ready Player One, except good, and the book that Ready Player One ripped off. So it's about virtual reality. I don't really know, but similar to Ready Player One, I think, except also adult, I believe. We shall see. We shall see. Unbelievable by T. Christian Miller and Ken Armstrong. This is a nonfiction book about a woman who was raped and no one believed her. I think she had like mental health issues. She was raped and people like accuse her of lying, and she's like, okay, like I was lying, sure, stop accusing me, basically. And she was charged with a false report, and then 2 years later they're investigating a different rape, and they realize that it's the same rapist who's been active this whole time, and it's a nonfiction book, and I really wanted to read this. It sounded fascinating, just like the story itself and what happened, and like the cops basically caused this whole thing, and it's just heartbreaking because she was just a teenager, and I don't know, such a horrifying story, and I really, really wanted to read it. Like, this is one that I heard about and just like stayed inside my head, and I couldn't let it go because I wanted to read it. I think it's a Netflix series now, which I don't know if I have super interest in watching that, but I did really want to read the book. Her Fearful Symmetry by Audrey Niffenegger. I read this actually already. I read it after buying it. I might actually wind up hauling this at some point. It wasn't bad, but it was just like not super to my taste. Basically, these two twin sisters inherit a house or an apartment in England from their aunt, who is their mother's twin sister. And they basically go there, and one of the conditions of them inheriting is that they have to live in that house for a year. That's basically it. And it's like a ghost story, because their aunt's boyfriend is still living there, and there's an OCD neighbor that they have who just like can't leave his apartment because of his anxiety. And it was interesting. I like the writing style, I like the story, okay, but like at the end of the day it is like supernatural and a ghost story, and Spleen is just the cutest little thing in existence. It's so distracting while I'm trying to film. I just keep looking at her and she's just like asleep on her back being so cute. But I think at the end of the day it was just like not super to my taste. Not in a bad way, but just like not the kind of thing I gravitate towards, and I don't gravitate towards it for a reason, but it was still like interesting and worthwhile. But I read it. I bought it and I read it like a normal human being instead of just like accumulating massive piles. Sister of My Heart by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. This is about the daughter of an upper caste Calcutta family. Her cousin is the black sheep and is plain whip smart and defiant. But she's really bonded to her, and there are dark family secrets and arranged marriages, and it sounds tragedy strikes them both. It sounds really interesting. It's set in both India and America. I think one of the cousins moves to America and one stays in India, but it sounds interesting. And I don't know anything about it. I've never heard of this book before. I think I just saw it at Goodwill and just like read the back and it was interesting to me, so I grabbed it. Just like The Eternal Story. American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson. This is about a young black woman who's in the FBI in the 80s. She's apparently supposed to go undercover to help take down Thomas Sankara, who's the president of Burkina Faso. And she's pretty much sure she's only offered the job because she has the right appearance to like seduce him. She's his type. She's involved in the coup that brings him down, but kind of makes her feel questionably about like her life and her morals, apparently. It's based on a true story, but not one that I'm familiar with. I saw this when I worked at the bookstore. It was just like on a table for months and months and months. And I read the back of it and it sounded kind of interesting, and I saw it in a thrift store and just grabbed it because I was like, potentially interesting. The light is changing constantly. There's nothing I can do about that. It's what we live with. A Wilder Rose by Susan Wittig Albert. This is about Rose Wilder Lane. She married at some point, apparently. Laura Ingalls Wilder's daughter. It's based on her unpublished diaries and letters. Rose is not Laura Ingalls Wilder. And it's just a novel about her and her relationship with her mother. It's a novel. Like, it's not true. Like, it's based on truth, don't get me wrong. But I think it is very much more, like, kind of dramatized a little bit. But it sounds interesting. I got a couple of books about Laura Ingalls Wilder and Rose Wilder, and just to learn more about it. Because, like, who didn't read those books and love those books as a kid? Like, I grew up reading all the Little House on the Prairie and all the ones about, like, her daughter and all the ones about, like, her ancestors, and like that was what I grew up reading. So books about them intrigue me because, like, the true story is interesting too. Like, it's definitely not what was portrayed in the books, but it's still interesting. I don't know if I just made the lighting situation better or worse. I don't think there's any saving it at this point. We go on, we keep going, we just keep filming because it's an hour in almost and I'm not halfway through. Frog Music by Emma Donoghue. All I know about this is that I read Room, and I really liked Room, and Emma Donoghue wrote Room, and this book was like 30 cents or something. Set in 1876, a young woman is shot dead, and her friend is a French burlesque dancer who's trying to bring the murderer to justice. Sounds interesting. That's all I know. That's all I really cared to know. The Snowman by Joe Nesbo. I've heard of Joe Nesbo. I'm pretty sure I've heard people on BookTube talk about him. A boy's mother disappears, and the only thing that remains is a pink scarf, which is now worn by the snowman that appeared in their yard the next day, or earlier that day. And the police inspector thinks there's a link between that and, like, a murder or something. And it's just the investigation, and I like missing persons cases. I'm easy. Trying to go faster. Girls Like Us, a memoir by Rachel Lloyd. Fighting for a world where girls are not for sale. Oh, I remember this. This is about a woman who was trafficked when she was a teenager. It's just like her memoir and like what happened to her, and like now she is the founder of an organization to like help save girls from that life. So it sounded really interesting. I don't know anything about it or her, but I think it's interesting and potentially important. I don't know. I might learn something from it. All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. Heard great things about Jason Reynolds, just like constantly, and I've wanted to read him. He writes YA, I think, novels in verse, or I think he frequently writes novels in verse anyway. Maybe. I almost didn't pick this up because it reminded me, like the vague premise reminded me of Anything But Okay by Sarah Dara Littman, which I hated. That was a horrible book. But it's like, this is Own Voices. It's about a boy who was attacked by a cop because it looked like he might have been stealing, and he winds up in the hospital, and then a white kid saw his best friend's older brother. His best friend's older brother was the cop, and the school is divided, the media is divided, etc., etc., and they have to like face the truth about what happened. It reminds me a lot of Anything But Okay, which was just so bad and so poorly done, and I was not a fan of that at all. But this is Own Voices, and I definitely trust Jason Reynolds a lot more with dealing with racism than like I trust Sarah Dara Littman, because her book was just like lacked any nuance and was just so horribly written and just like terrible in essence. And it did just like instinctively turn me off this a little bit. But I feel like this will be much more well done than that one was. So it's like, I don't want to judge Jason Reynolds, who gets all kinds of acclaim for writing these books about difficult topics like racism. Well, I should say, I think he specifically writes about racism a lot and like trauma in young teenagers. But I don't want to like I want to avoid something he wrote because another author, like a white woman, wrote something that wasn't good, that sounded like similar. I do really want to read him. Is basically what I mean. Promise by Min Rose Gwen. I don't remember this at all, and there is no information about this book. Okay, that's interesting. Sorry. I think I knew this when I bought it, because now that I'm reading it, it sounds familiar. But essentially, there was a really bad tornado in Mississippi in 1936. It's like one of the most deadly of all time, and the official death toll was like 216 to 233, and the author like grew up knowing about it because she lived near there, and like her grandparents lived through it. And then when she was older, she realized that the casualty records didn't include the African American community, which was almost like half the town's population. And so the death and injury tolls were like significantly higher, and they, like, we'll never know like how many people died because they weren't included. And I think it's about that. There's also an arc, which might be why there's no information, but it's a novel, and I think it focuses on the Black community and like their experiences, which sounds really, really interesting to me, because otherwise this didn't really seem like a book I was interested in. But it's taking something that like we heard about, that we knew about, and like there's so much more information that like wasn't discussed. So I don't know. The more I read about that, the more I was like, ooh, I actually want this a lot. Which I should feel about all of these, but I don't, because I have no standards when I buy books. I just want to buy books to like self-soothe. Comeback by Claire Fontaine and Mia Fontaine. A mother and daughter's journey through hell and back. I think this one was about drugs. Yeah, it's about a girl who got addicted to drugs as a teenager. And it's by both the daughter and the mother. I think she got clean eventually. And it's just like, it's nonfiction, and it's both their stories and both their perspectives, which sounds cool. I don't know anything about this. I'd not heard of this, but it does sound like really potentially like worthwhile to read. Like, two different perspectives in a memoir is always like interesting, and it's just about drug addiction and like families living with it and the experiences of the girl who was addicted. So good, potentially. I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh. This is a thriller. I don't know what it's about. I didn't read the back. I've heard people on here talk about Claire McIntosh. Don't really remember who, but people definitely have. Yeah, I kind of saw her and was like, oh, I remember people talking about how much they love Claire McIntosh, so I should grab something. And I did, and don't know what it's about, but hopefully it's a good one to start with. Undone by Karen Slaughter. Have I read this? Yes. Oh, this is the first one where Sarah Linton was in the Will Trent series. But I do pick up Karen Slaughter books on occasion because I would like to collect her books. I really love her Will Trent series, and I got to read her other cop series, which was her first series. Don't remember what it's called, but it's about Jeffrey Tolliver and Sarah Linton. And Sarah Linton is in the Will Trent series later, so I have been like kind of spoiled for the first series, but interesting. I like her books. They're really graphic and dark, and I just grabbed this because I collect them. I don't remember if I specifically really loved this one, but I remember it being good because I remember liking Sarah Linton's introduction to the series. Alone by Lisa Gardner. I haven't read this one. I had a list of Lisa Gardner books that my library doesn't have, and I do want to read them all. So I think now I own all of the books off that list, so that I can read all of her books, except for one that's about spiders, which, like, I don't mess with. But that's why I got this, because, like, I would prefer to read it from the library, but my library just doesn't have it. So I just grabbed a copy, and I'm sure once I read it, I will unhaul it. The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I remember someone on BookTube, or several someones, talking about this book, and it sounded good. It's set in 1686. I think it's an arranged marriage with this wealthy older man, and he gives her a tiny miniature replica of their home, and apparently it's like creepy and there are escalating dangers, and I just remember it sounded interesting, and the way people described it on BookTube made it sound good. Maybe, hopefully, we'll see. Again, not super my kind of thing usually, but I was willing to give it a go. The Third Victim by Lisa Gardner. Same as the other Lisa Gardner book. The other one was a standalone, I think. This is part of the Pierce Quincy series, Again, one of her earliest books, which is questionable to me because I tend to not like her earliest books as much, but I want to read all her books. Like, I just want to complete her. Again, minus the one spider book that I tried to read, but like, I don't do spiders. And there was just a spider fact at the beginning of every chapter. And like, why? Why would you do that? I got like 3 chapters in and I just slammed it shut and returned it to the library because I couldn't deal. But yeah, another one of her books, and I own them all now that I haven't read. I've read all the library ones, and now I own the ones that the library doesn't have. Yeah. The Serialist by David Gordon. It's about a struggling writer who writes pulpy serial novels, vampire books, detective stories, etc. under various pseudonyms. He agrees to ghostwrite the memoir of a murderer, and then murders start happening in real life, and he's got to investigate because, like, they're tied to the murderer that he's writing the book for. Sounds cool. I like thrillery things about murders. Obviously, I don't really have anything to add. On a Custom Earth by Jump Lahiri. I own the namesake, and I've not read it yet. Why? Why do I do this? I read at least one short story by her when I was in college, and I liked it. I remember really liking it, and people seem to really love her. These are short stories as well. They apparently take us from Cambridge and Seattle to India and Thailand as they explore the secrets of family life. I don't think I knew this was a short story collection. I think I just grabbed it because I wanted another one of Jump Lahiri's books, but I do like short stories, so that's an interesting find. I say interesting. Like, I shouldn't have already known that. Like, I bought this book. I should at least know that a short story is not a novel. Back to the Little House stuff. Caroline, Little House Revisited by Sarah Miller. This is a novel, question mark? Yeah, this is a novel. It's about Caroline Ingalls, who is Laura Ingalls Wilder's mother. I think it's about the same time period as the Little House on the Prairie books. It's just from a different perspective. It's told like from the mother's perspective instead of the little girl's perspective. So you get a lot more of like the nuance of what was going on behind the scenes, which is interesting. I don't know if this is going to be like a little bit more real than those books were, or because those books were obviously heavily sanitized. And I don't know if this one's going to be like that or if it's taking a more realistic approach. I don't know. Sounds good though. So whatever it is, I'm reading it in the next 5 to 20 years probably. Webster, Tales of an Outlaw by Ellen Emerson White. This is a shelter dog who decides he's better off on his own, so he kind of leaves the shelter. The Bad Hat, or Webster as the staff at the shelter call me. He decides to escape from the shelter. I don't usually read animal books. I don't like animal books because there's always some like inherent sadness or guilt I feel reading them. I just can't handle anything happening to animals. But this was written by Ellen Emerson White, who's one of my favorite authors. She wrote the President's Daughter series, which I talk about all the time, and I love her, and I'm trying to collect like most or all of her books. I will give this a go. I think it's middle grade. I'm hoping it's not that sad, but like currently it's just a dog sitting in the rain looking sad, so it doesn't thrill me. But I do want to like have all her books and read all her books. But this is probably going to be one that I don't pick up for a minute because I gotta like steel myself for it. I don't like reading books that just focus on animals. Even if they're happy overall, there's still like something in them that's like heartbreaking. So, and I've got a lot of her books to read still, so this is probably going to be like a closer to the 20-year mark probably. Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. Who hasn't talked about this book? Lots of people have. I've heard about it from numerous sources. I think the first person I heard talk about it was Claudia from Spencer's Library. It's about fathers and sons and the spiritual battles that still rage in America's heart. I don't actually know what it's about because there's not a real description on this, but I heard it's wonderful, and I heard it's like so slow and so drawn out, and I just love dramas that take forever to get to the point. Like, the longer it takes to get to the point, the happier I am. I know it's like there's a lot of religion discussed in it. I think there's like some epistolary stuff going on, maybe not, I don't know, but it sounded like it might be really wonderful and a favorite. The Home for Unwanted Girls by Joanna Goodman. author of The Finishing School. This is the other book by her that I picked up. I picked them up at the same time. This is set in the 1950s in Quebec. She wants to marry the poor French boy on the farm and gets pregnant at 15. Her parents make her give the baby up for adoption, and this is about the baby, I think, and the mother. And their lives have intertwined but never touched, and they're finally brought together at some point. It's inspired by true events, which, like, I don't know. When books say that, I don't know how true they mean. Like, do they mean that they took a basic story? Like, do they found the person and based this book on that person? Or is it just, like, this happened to people, so it's kind of just based on true events in general? Like, what does that mean? But it does sound really good. Just like this teenage girl is forced to give her child up for adoption, and the child winds up growing up in like an orphanage and is badly treated, and then has to deal with the world she's not prepared for, and then like their lives kind of have intertwined and they finally meet each other. I don't know. It sounds good. Like, it sounds like exactly the kind of thing I really enjoy reading. At least we're on to a new stack. That's progress, but I still gotta go through both of these, and there's still like a pile on the floor over here, and then there's still this entire shelf. Aren't you glad you decided to click on this video? No one's still watching at this point. Why am I even lying to myself? The Bright Forever by Lee Martin. This doesn't even sound familiar to me. This doesn't say what it's about. It's a suspenseful, deeply affecting novel about the choices people make that change their lives forever. I have no idea what genre this even is. Like, I can't tell you anything about this book. That's fine. I picked it up. It must have intrigued me at some point. That's what we're sticking with. Graham Greene, The Human Factor. Who is it that talks about Graham Greene? Is it Dane Cobain? I think it's Dane. I've never read Graham Greene before. I would like to try. That's why I picked it up, because there's no description of this book on the back, so I have no idea what this one is. But apparently, it's one of his very best books. I think it was Dane who talks about Graham Greene a lot, but I could be mistaken. But I did want to try it just because, like, I don't know, when you hear someone talk about someone so much, it's just like, you're curious. Even if it might not necessarily be your thing, it's just like, I want to see what's being discussed here. I want to experience it for myself, so we'll see. We shall see. A Lucky Child, a memoir of surviving Auschwitz as a young boy by Thomas Bergenthal. This is just a memoir of a 10-year-old boy who wound up in Auschwitz with his family and managed to survive. Not sure I would call him lucky in any way. I feel like memoirs about the Holocaust are just like continuously horrifying and just like never get less horrifying, but I want to read them because it's like, it feels like they need to be read. Like, and I know Night by Elie Wiesel is like the one, whether you consider it like a novel or his memoir, but I don't know. I just, whenever I see one, I just feel like it should be read. Like, these people's experiences should be shared and discussed and remembered, and I don't know. So it does look like a really heartbreaking book. I mean, like, obviously it's about a 10-year-old in Auschwitz, just horrifying. And I think there's an afterword, because this is not a first edition. And I think because of this book, there are more archives that he had access to, which let him learn more about his mother and his father and like what happened, because like it's really hard to find out what happened to people in Auschwitz. Oh, he's apparently an international human rights expert in law, and he's a judge at the International Court of Justice. That's interesting. He's an interesting person. This is one of those books that the more I read it, the more I'm like, I definitely didn't read all of this when I bought it, and I really, really want to read the book now, so stoked on that. The Tiger's Wife by Taya Obret. It's in a Balkan country mending from war. A young doctor is compelled to unravel the mysterious circumstances surrounding her beloved grandfather's recent death. This sounds like magical realism. I think the only sentence I read was about a young doctor in a war-torn Balkan country, and I was like, that sounds really good. And then the more you get down, the more it's like, there's a deathless man in The Legend of the Tiger's Wife, and like, I don't really do magical realism, so that's concerning, and probably a reason you should read the descriptions of books that you buy. But it's perhaps not magical realism, and even if it is, it might be good and I might like it. I have no standards. I just buy anything. The Unseen World by Liz Moore. If you watch my videos a lot, you might recognize this book. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Potentially my favorite book of all time. This is a 5-star book for me. It's wonderful. It's amazing. I've read it a lot. I've gifted it to so many people because I'm just like, read this wonderful, amazing book. I love it more than anything. This is a historical fiction book about a girl whose father he's older than most fathers would be. He's like in his late 50s, I think, when she's a child, and he's diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and it's kind of about her kind of growing up with that, dealing with that, and also learning that her father might not be the person she thought he was. And there's a little bit of science fiction in this. He's a university professor and does like computer stuff, and there's like kind of like virtual reality stuff and artificial intelligence maybe, and it's really, really wonderful. I adore this more than anything. It's just such a good book, so I highly recommend this one. And it was one of those things I just finally needed to buy it for myself because I've needed to for a few years now, and I've bought it for so many other people, and now I finally have my own copy. Trainspotting by Irvine Welsh. I don't actually know what this book is about. I've not read this book. I've not seen this movie. Deserves to sell more copies than the Bible. That's edgy. As unforgettable a clutch of junkies, rude boys, and nutters as readers will ever encounter. I don't know. This doesn't seem like something I would like, but it's just one of those things that's so like culturally relevant and referenced all the time that like I just want to experience it. But I don't really have high hopes for like personally loving it, but maybe I will appreciate it. I could live with that. I'm also at this point running out of room to just stack books on the floor around me. Oh, I have 3 interesting books. Well, let's do this first. Pachinko by Minjin Lee. This is a 4-generation saga of a Korean family. It's just like about the family. I don't know what the actual plot is, but the way it was described was just this like multi-generational saga about this family, and it sounded so good, and I love books like that, so I didn't even read the description. I have no idea what it's about. Starts in the early 1900s and then probably goes to present day if it's about 4 generations. Yeah, I don't know, but it sounds like the kind of thing I would love. Also, I'm sorry if my voice sounds like it's dying. It's because my voice is dying. 4 books, very different, kind of go together. I did not pick these out. There's a website called Good Fair that sells like used clothing mostly, but they also had you could buy 3 books from them. It was like a book bundle where like you would just buy like 3 used books and you would get 3 random used books. And I did that just because I was kind of curious and I had a coupon and I was like, sure, why not? Like, it's not expensive anyway. Didn't have high expectations. I kind of thought it was going to be like when you just buy the books that are like, you know, the books that if you go to thrift stores, it's like you see the same books sitting there for months at a time because no one wants them. That's kind of what I was expecting to receive. But I didn't. I received books that sounded actually really interesting. At least 2 of the 3. The first is The Woman Who Married a Bear by John Straley. It's set in Alaska, about a woman who engages a local investigator to investigate her son's murder. It's been marked as solved, but she doesn't think it's solved. She thinks there's a conspiracy, apparently. It sounds really interesting. And then Where the Heart Is by Billy Letts, which is about a pregnant woman who was going to California with her boyfriend. And then she winds up being stranded at like this Walmart in Oklahoma with like $5, you know? And it's just like her life. She's homeless, jobless. She secretly lives in the Walmart. And it sounds not like something I would pick up for myself, but it sounds like it could be really interesting and good. And then the third book, which is the questionable one for me, is The Bishop's Daughter by Wanda E. Brunstetter. It's, first of all, it's number 3 in a series, and I need to check if, like, it's the kind of series where you need to read them in order, you know? Because, like, sometimes you don't. the questionable things about this for me. It's the third in a series. It's about Amish country, and I think it's kind of romancy. Actually, it is a romance novel. So it's the third in the series, it's a romance novel, and it's very religious. And I think it's religious in a way that, like, it's not like the book happens to be about religion, but, like, it's a very, like, faith-based book, which is not my kind of thing, but I might try to read it anyway, just because, like, I kind of randomly got it, and I'm curious. Really not my kind of thing, but just for curiosity, I might try. But yeah, I still think, like, even if I hate this book, or even if I wind up unhauling it without reading it, which I might, like, depending, I want to, like, look into it more a little bit before I do that. 2 out of 3 books that sound interesting and worth reading to me is really good for, like, just getting 3 random books with, like, no indication of genre or, like, when it was published or quality or literally anything. 2 out of 3 seem good, and yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that, even if this one is kind of, like, iffy for me. Ian Banks of The Bridge. I read The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks, and I was not a fan. I really hated that book, but I've been told that I should try more Ian Banks, and I've been told that The Bridge is a good one. So I will read this book, but if I don't like this one, then I think I'm done with Ian Banks, because I found The Wasp Factory horrifying and upsetting and kind of somewhat offensive. Not a fan. This one, a man's in a coma after a near-fatal accident. He's in a surreal world of the bridge, a world free of the usual constraints of time and space. It seems weird, but maybe really good. We'll see. Tess of the Dubervilles by Thomas Hardy. A classic that I would like to read. A beautiful young woman living with her impoverished family. They're connected to the wealthy Dubervilles, and they send Tess to claim a portion of their fortune. Don't want to read anymore because descriptions of classic novels tend to spoil things a little bit. Oh, did you wake up? She's like, why are there so many books out? I like this. Can it always be like this? But yeah, this is just one that I've heard about and I've wanted to read for a while. Not read any Thomas Hardy before, but I would like to try this one. Forward by Abby Wambach. This is her memoir. I'm not the biggest fan of Abby Wambach anymore. There's just something about watching someone take a dive into the penalty box to, like, really turn you off at them. But I was a really big fan of hers when I was a kid. Because she was kind of, I was just, like, the tiniest bit young for, like, the Mia Hamm generation. Like, I caught, like, the very tail end of that. But Abby Wambach was really, like, my prime into soccer years, you know? So this seemed like a really, I don't know. I would like to know more about her because I don't really know anything about her as a person. Because she's retired now. And yeah, I kind of saw this and was like, sure, let's learn a little bit more about Abby Wambach. Because, like, I don't know anything about her. So we'll see. We'll learn. The Last Widow by Karen Slaughter. This is one I've read. Not the biggest fan of this one, but I do want to just, like, collect her Will Trent series because I do really love her Will Trent series, even if this was kind of the lesser ones in my opinion, but I do want to collect her books. And this one's about, like, people are kidnapped and there's going to be a massacre that Will Trent has to prevent in order to save the love of his life. Thank you, Will Trent. We wish to inform you that tomorrow we will be killed with our families by Philip Gorovich. This is about Rwanda. This was recommended by Brian from Bookish. He had a video where he recommended some books. I don't remember what the theme of that video was. It's about the genocide in Rwanda in the 90s. Like 800,000 Tutsis were murdered. I've not read much about Rwanda because, like, I mean, I was 1 during the Rwandan genocide. Or when it started, I was 1. So, like, I obviously heard of it, but I don't know, like, specifics. And this seemed like an interesting book and maybe a good place to start. But I just remember Brian talking about it and it sounded really, really interesting. I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I've heard a number of people talk about this book. This is one of those books that a lot of people read in their childhood. It's a diary. I mean, like a fictional diary, obviously, of a woman who lives in or not a woman, a teenager who lives in an English castle, and this is 6 months of diaries, and it's just like her childhood, I think. I don't think it's like really got a plot. I think it's just like coming of age story. And people always talk about how charming and lovely this is, and this was one of their childhood favorites, and I never read it. I don't know, I never heard of it until booktube, and it just sounded like something that I would love, like, to bits. So I grabbed it, and I hope I love it, because this is one of those books that, like, I'm gonna be disappointed if I don't love it, because I just really, really want to. Ow. That was my shoulder. Ordinary Men, Reserve Police Battalion 101 and the Final Solution in Poland by Christopher R. Browning. This is a nonfiction book about the Reserve Police Battalion 101. It's just basically about how these random middle-aged Germans became like cold-blooded killers during the Holocaust. So it's about this specific group, but I think it's like, in theory, the ideas of this book are about more than this one specific group. But interesting nonfiction book about World War II. I tend to pick them up just like by nature. If I Die in a Combat Zone by Tim O'Brien. This is his memoir about being in Vietnam. I read one Tim O'Brien book, In the Lake of the Woods, I think it was called. I felt like I should have loved that book, and I just didn't. There was something about it that fell flat for me, but I do plan to read his most famous book, which I'm blanking on, The Things They Carried. I own that, and then I saw this, and it just seemed really interesting, and it's just about him being an infantryman in Vietnam. It's beautifully written and searingly heartfelt, apparently, but it looks good, and I don't know, it's one of those things, like, I want to know more about Vietnam, because I feel like I should, and this just seems like, I don't know, I saw this and I was just like, that seems like a really good book, and I don't know why I think it's a really good book, but it just seems like one. Joyce Carol Oates, We Were the Mulvaney's. I've read at least one of her books before. It was kind of about abortion, and it was like not the greatest thing I've ever read, but there was something about her writing style and the way everything was so drawn out and detailed that I really enjoyed. I think she's not quite as progressive as she thinks she is. That was the vibe I got, but I don't know anything about her. Something happens on Valentine's Day in 1976 to make this normal family, the Mulvaneys, I don't know, an incident happens that is hushed up in the town and never spoken of in the Mulvaney home, and there are tragic consequences. I just thought I might try another Joyce Carol Oates book, 'cause, like, I don't know, the first one I read was like but also like if that makes sense. Like, it was bad. Like, it was definitely like, well, I don't want to say it was bad. It was one of those books I don't think I would recommend it, because there were like too many issues in it. But the parts that were good were just like, the writing style was interesting in a way that I think a lot of people would hate, but I kind of liked, if that makes sense. And I kind of wanted to try another one of her books. Tempting Fate by Jane Green. This couple who are in their 40s. They've been married for 18 years. They have 2 kids. They're very happy. And then the wife starts having an affair, and she's not the kind of person to have an affair. And it's kind of just about that unraveling her life, which could kind of go one of 2 ways. It could be like super cringy, because like cheating narratives are frequently cringy in books, but I think sometimes they're really well done and they're really nuanced, and there's just like a lot of interesting things that like you can do with a cheating narrative if it's well done. Like, that's kind of like the question, you know? So this one was kind of like I was on the fence about whether to get it, but I got it just in case it's really good, because like I always hope books are better. I mean, obviously any book I plan to read, I hope it's better and not bad, but like this one was a little bit questionable, but like hopefully good. The Assault by Harry Mulisch. This is a spy thriller set in Nazi Germany. Well, it's set in Poland. No, it's set in Holland. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. But it's set in 45 in Holland. A Nazi is assassinated, and the Germans retaliate by killing a family, and only the son, a young son, survives. and it's basically about that son's life, and he tries to have like a normal life and a successful career, and it's like he can't like quite let go of the past because, you know, his whole family was slaughtered. So I've not heard of this, but it sounds really good. Romance is a Wonderful Thing by Ellen Emerson White. I've discussed her. I love her. This book is not something I would gravitate towards. It's an 80s book, I believe. It's a romance about these two teenagers in high school who are like opposites, and everyone's like, what do you see in each other? Like, why are you dating? And they're in love, and Trish knows a secret. The girl knows a secret about the guy, and like that's what they have in common, and she can't tell anyone because it's a secret. So I don't know. It's not the kind of thing I would pick up were it not a book by my favorite author, but because she wrote it, I'm definitely willing to try this because I feel like it's going to be a lot better than I think it is because her writing is just like wonderful and her characters are amazing. Sugar Run by Mesha Marin. This is about a 17-year-old in 1989 is sentenced to life in prison, but she's released like 20 years later, and she doesn't know what to do or where to go or like whatever, and then she falls in love with a young mother. It's about the Appalachian Mountains, or not about it, but it's like kind of centered around the Appalachian Mountains. This was on my TBR for a while. I don't really remember why, but I was just kind of looking at it and it sounded good, and it just sounded like I want this in my life right now. It sounds like a lot's going on in this book, but I want to read it. And I don't know why the main character was in prison. If you're sentenced to life in prison when you're 17, I assume murder. Like, I assume it has to be murder, right? But yeah, and I guess I'll find out in the next 5 to 20 years when I read this book. Lady Charlie's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. Again, another classic that I would like to read. Oh, apparently it was banned for being pornographic in 1928. That's interesting. I don't think anyone would consider it pornographic today, or well, many people. I'm sure some people would, but yeah, I don't want to read about it because, again, classic descriptions just so often spoil the whole book. Like, it's still a book. I don't want you to tell me like the point and the ending. Let me figure it out for myself. But yeah, it's just a classic that I kind of wanted to pick up. The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, about a war with aliens, and a reluctant conscript is drafted and he's propelled through space, but the problem is it means he's living at like a different time than his friends, the time dilation. So like he's aging months and the earth has aged like centuries. So if he comes home 2 years later, you know, or even like a year later, it's like everyone he knows and all their children are all dead and we're just in a completely different time. So it sounds interesting. Not my usual kind of book, but I was kind of reading the description and I was just kind of down, and apparently it's fairly acclaimed. It won the Hugo Award, or another one of his books won the Hugo Award. He's a Hugo winner and Nebula Award winner. That's interesting. Oh no, this book won both the Hugo and the Nebula Awards. Okay, so I was right the first time. But it sounds good, and I really wanted it. Like, it was one of those books I was like, this isn't what I usually read, but I really, really want it, which I feel like is good. Zoo Station by David Downing. This is also about Germany in the 1930s. It's about a British journalist who lives there, and his longtime girlfriend and son are there. Intelligence agencies from like all sides of the war trying to recruit him, and he's just trying to live his life. So kind of a spy thriller, political intrigue. Sounds maybe interesting. Not like the kind of book I usually pick up about this time period, but we shall see. And finally, the last book on the floor before I get to, oh, there's this stack too. Oh god, there's just more, and this whole shelf down here is stuff I have to, I should have just done 2 videos. I should have just done 2 more videos, but it's too late now. We're committed. Let Us Water the Flowers, the memoir of a political prisoner in Iran by Jafar Yaghoubi. This is about, was he a doctor? But maybe like a PhD doctor, not like, yeah, he's a PhD doctor. In the summer of 1988, there was a systematic execution of political prisoners in Iran. Thousands of prisoners were hanged, and the Iranian government tried to hide the existence of like all the murders and stuff that happened. And this is a memoir of a man who survived the killings but was a political prisoner at the time. So interesting, different from what I usually read in a good way, but also like exactly like the kind of thing I would usually read. So win-win. Red Notice, a true story of high finance, murder, and one man's fight for justice, by Bill Browder. This is a real life thriller about accidental activists. Oh, this is a memoir. This is about himself. My bad. He's apparently a financial guy, and he lived in Russia and made a fortune there, and then he went after corruption in the Russian government, and he escaped barely, and his Russian lawyer was tortured to death in jail. He became an activist against Russia. Potentially interesting. I don't know anything about this book, but we'll see. I kind of want to Google it just to make sure that like this dude's kind of trustworthy, because sometimes when you get into like political memoir stuff, I want to know who the person is so that I know like where they're coming from, because it really does like skew your thoughts on it. But I've never heard of him before, so I don't know that much about Russia, so like let's learn. Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This is about a man who, Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer, but it's one of his cases was a man who was sentenced to die for a murder that he didn't commit, and it's about that, based in race. I don't know the specifics of this book, but I really like law books like this. I mean, it's not like a law book, but it's like kind of set around the justice system and like the inequalities and the flaws in the justice system. And I wanted to read this for the longest time, and my mother wound up finding a copy and just being like, hey, do you want this random book that I have? And I'm like, desperately, yes, I want this random book. Like, I wanted it for so long. I still haven't read it yet, but I really, really need to, because it's just one of those books that I heard about it and I was like, yes, that needs to be in my life. This is exactly the kind of book I want to read. So we'll read it hopefully soon. Oh, 2 books that go together. Thank God I can get through 2 at the same time. Queendom of the Seven Lakes and King of the Seven Lakes by A.B. Endicott. These are Abby of Pellinor's favorite books. I don't know if they were like favorites, but they're like kind of top tier. I think for her, they're kind of like The President's Daughter, where they're like, you feel like they're kind of up with the favorites, but because they're not discussed much or very well known, you want to like talk about them even more. Just because it's like, I need to like talk about these amazing books that no one knows about. But they're fantasy books about there's no description on the back here. That's helpful, but she loves them, and I've meant to read them for like a long time. She says they remind her of the books of Pellinor, which we both love, we adore, by Alison Croghan. They're these Australian high fantasy books that came out like ages ago, like when I was a kid, and I just grew up reading them and loved them. Hi, little chirpy baby. And I meant to get these for a long time, but I finally got them, so now I shall read them. Okay, she's just murdering my hand down here. If I try to bring it up, yep, there's teeth attached. Thank you, honey. Skeletons of the Sahara by Dean King. A true story of survival. It's a masterpiece of historical adventure. It recounts the experiences of 12 American soldiers who were shipwrecked off the coast of Africa in 1815. They were captured, had a 2-month journey through the Sahara, almost died. Some of them might have died. There was barbarism, murder, starvation, death, dehydration, and hostile tribes. So it's a gripping account of courage, brotherhood, and survival. Had not heard of this, don't really know why I picked it up, but yeah. Apparently at the time I found it interesting, and now I'm kind of like, why did I pick this up? But you know, I have it. I'll read it, hopefully it's good. And then Caroline Leavitt, Is This Tomorrow? A novel. I don't remember this. A woman rents a house with her 12-year-old son in Boston. She's a beautiful, divorced Jewish working mother. This is 1956. Her neighbors don't like the fact that she's probably beautiful, divorced, Jewish, or a working mother. And I think that's where the conflict goes. Oh, and then the son goes missing. Wait, no. Not the son. One of the son's friends goes missing. People decide to blame Ava and her son. And then years later, her son and the sister of the boy who goes missing kind of try to figure out what happened to her brother and like the final pieces of it. So it sounds really good. It doesn't sound at all familiar, so I'm not sure when I bought this or why I bought this or if I read the back cover, but yeah, yay. I'm down to the final shelf. God's bless. I'm dying here. I have a stack of books to go together, so I don't have like an entire shelf to get through. I have Richard Castle books, the Nikki Heat series. This is not the whole series. Let's have my knee up here to balance them. This is not the whole series. I already own like 2 or 3 of the books, but essentially there's a TV show called Castle, and it's about a man, Nathan Fillion, who is a writer. He's a novelist. He writes crime fiction novels, and he decides he just really desperately needs to follow this female cop around to get inspiration for his novels, and then they fall in love, and it's very romancy and whatever. And these are the novels that he wrote. Obviously fictional. If you look at them, at the about the author on them, oh, it's on the back. The author picture is Nathan Fillion, and like obviously they're ghost written. Like Richard Castle did not write these books. He's a fictional character. Nathan Fillion did not write these books. They're all ghost written, but like I don't expect them to be good. And there are like 9 or 10 of them, and I just saw them in a thrift store, so I decided to finish my series. They're kind of more of like a novelty thing than like books I really desperately want to read. I will probably read them, at least a couple, but it is more like a novelty thing than like I bought these because I think they're gonna be good or whatever. If they're really good or if they're fine, I'll read them all, but I can't imagine I'll read more than a couple. I just wanted to have them. I also got a cookbook, Vegan Comfort Classics by Lauren Toyota. She runs the Hot for Food blog, which Jenna Marbles and Julian Solomita talk about a lot, which is why I got this book. I've made a few of her things before, but I kind of just wanted to get this book because like it's nice to have a cookbook, and I kind of want to do the thing that Dan Cobain does of like just tabbing all the recipes that look interesting and then just going through and making them. Not to like do a review of the book like he does, but just because like that seems like a fun project, and there's so many recipes that like look really good and I just never bother making them. So that might be a fun project to do. But like, tell me this doesn't look like delicious vegan food. Like, I don't eat meat. I'm not like 100% vegan, but I do try to eat vegan. But like, it's a vegan Philly cheesesteak and it looks delicious. Not that I would eat that anywhere near Philadelphia, but like vegan tacos look delicious. All of her food looks so good, and the recipes I've tried from her have been delicious. So I just wanted that book. This was exciting to me. The complete collections of Sherlock Holmes. I found this in a thrift store. I was looking for like a really nice Sherlock Holmes collection because I have some of them. The writing is teeny tiny. Oh my god. I have some of them, but I didn't have all of them, and I was kind of looking for a really nice like collection before I just tried to buy more. There are like 1,200 pages in this book, and the writing is tiny, and the margins are tiny. But this is just like a gorgeous edition. I was so thrilled to find this, and because I bought this in a box with other books, I paid $6 for like 30 books, including this one, which like is amazing to me. And I don't know, this is just such like a lovely edition, and I couldn't be more pleased with this book. It's exactly what I wanted. This is like a textbooky thing, but it's Reconstructing Gender, a multicultural anthology. And I want to say these are a collection of essays that might be a little bit much for me. It's by Stardust, or collected by Stardust. This is definitely more textbooky than something I would usually read, but I do want to flip through it and see if I can read some of the essays in here and if they're not too academic for me. It's a very academic book for sure. It's not like a nice collection of like creative nonfiction essays like I would normally get, but maybe interesting, maybe something I can read. But if I try this and it's just like too hard for me to follow, I'm not gonna like keep reading it. This is definitely I might like it, but I might just wind up reading a few pages and unhauling it. So we'll see. Hopefully I can follow it, but I do know like sometimes with the academic books, if you're not used to like academic writing styles and you're not like studying it in an academic setting where you kind of have other help, sometimes it can be hard to get through them. And I definitely read enough of those things in college that like I know I struggle with them. So we'll see how that book turns out. Paper Love, Searching for the Girl My Grandfather Left Behind by Sarah Wildman. I'm growing more illiterate by the second in this video. Apparently, this is nonfiction. It's like memoir-ish. She finds photographs of a young woman in her grandfather's old office, and her grandmother just says, "She was your grandfather's true love." And Sarah Wildman's like, "What?" So she just wants to figure out who the girl was, and apparently it's also a little bit Nazi related. He escaped from Vienna in the 30s, wound up in Austria. He was a doctor. One of the patients was maybe the girl, and it just seems interesting. I don't entirely know what the point of this book is. It's kind of like a long-winded description, but I don't know. It sounded interesting. It sounded good, and it's just like, I don't know, it's such like an odd story, and it's nonfiction, and like she just goes searching for this girl that apparently her grandfather was in love with decades and decades ago. So hopefully it's as good as it sounds. We'll see. And then different kind of book. It's Bibliophile by Jane Mount. It's described as an illustrated miscellany, which is kind of exactly what it is. It's just kind of like a variety of books and like illustrations and lists and like beautiful contemporary covers, and it's like all of them. And this is like not a book that I'll read cover to cover, but like it's just kind of like, ooh, I've read like half the books on here. I was just looking at them. I was like, oh, I've read The Goldfinch. I've read Girl in Pieces. Oh, We Are Okay is wonderful. I love We Are Okay. Oh, that makes me happy. I just turned to a random page and it's one of my favorite books. But this is a book that's fun to flip through. And just like, if you ever need like random ideas for a book, it's just like, oh, here's like a random list of dystopian books. And it's so lovely and fun. And it makes me happy. Like, it's definitely not a like read cover to cover, like sit down and page through it one by one, but it's just like, I don't know, it's so lovely. I like it. It's just one of those kind of happy making random things, and it's so pretty. All Emergencies Ring Super by Ellen Emerson White. I grabbed a few of her books in this haul. This one I don't know. There's an aspiring actress who may not be headed for Broadway, but is making a smashing debut as an amateur sleuth. I don't really know what this is about. She apparently starred in a commercial, which is kind of what she's known for, which is, it's nice to be known for something, but that's not really the ideal thing to be known for. And I don't know. I don't really feel like reading all that. I just got it because it was Ellen Emerson White. Again, she's my favorite, and I just want to own all of her books and read all of her books, and they've been a little bit difficult to collect, but I feel like I'm finally getting there. This was just like a random one that I'd not heard of before I started looking up a list of all her books. The Book of Essie by Megan McLean Weir. I don't know what this book is about, like genuinely. I have no idea. I heard people talking about it on BookTube a couple of years ago when it was like big or popular or whatever. Like there were a number of people who talked about it and really enjoyed it. And I never really got an idea of what this book is actually about. But for whatever reason, I was just obsessed with the idea of it. I was like, yes, I need that. That sounds amazing. It sounds like my kind of thing. I can't even tell you which genre this book is. I don't know if it's contemporary or historical fiction or like fantasy or like I don't know. She's the daughter of an evangelical preacher. Like, I didn't even know that, but like, despite knowing literally nothing about this book, I desperately want to read it, and I get the vibe that I will love it, and I don't know why. I don't know where this feeling comes from, but I want it. Like, I really, really wanted it, so we'll see. Hopefully I do love it as much as like I think I will or I want to. We'll see. Stolen Lives by Malika Ofker and Michelle Fitosi. Well, Malika Ofker is the daughter of the King of Morocco's closest aide. She was adopted by the king, was a very eligible heiress until her father was arrested and executed trying to assassinate the king, which kind of destroyed her life, and her and all her siblings and her mother were imprisoned for like 15 years. And then she tried to escape and was recaptured in like 20 years in prison, I think. She finally was able to leave Morocco, like 24 years after her father was arrested and executed. She was able to leave Morocco, and I had no idea about this. Like, this is something I've never heard of, and it sounds fascinating, and like I want to read this. I want to find out what happened and like what the deal was, and like it's just one of those nonfiction books that like I had no idea this happened. I'd never even heard an inkling of this before, so I'm just utterly fascinated by the concept. Night Film by Marisha Pessl. I read Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessl and Special Topics in Calamity Physics. I think I might have buddy read both with Abby McReeds before I just turned into the world's biggest booktube flake. Yeah, I read both of those, and they were both good in like very different ways. I think I preferred Neverworld Wake. It was also like the more commercial of her novels. I don't know what this is about. I don't really want to know what this is about. I want to like go in completely blind because her books are weird, and I feel like they're almost better that way. If you just like don't have expectations and just read them. But I wanted to read this for a minute, and I just like hadn't bothered picking it up, so I saw it in a thrift store and was like, mine. This is a gorgeous copy. Like, I never get books that are this pretty, so I was just like, this is beautiful. It's all reflective. I know that doesn't really matter, like, but it's just having pretty things is fun sometimes. And look at the end pages. Like, what even is this? Sorry, I don't get pretty books. Most of my books come used, so I'm used to getting things like this where like the cover is half falling off, and like pretty things are just like absurd to me, and like they don't exist in my world. But yeah, I do want to read this. Her other two books were just like good. This is like hopefully good as well. I've heard good things about this one, so hopefully it's just like better. I have 4 books in a series. They're not in order. That's fine. Leviathan Wakes, Abaddon's Gate, Sibylla Byrne, and Nemesis Games by James S.A. Corey, which is a pseudonym for 2 guys. I don't remember their real names. I'm sorry. It's books 1, 3, 4, and 5. I already own the second one. I held that at a different point, like 2 years ago. Still haven't read it. Let's bring these up. I liked the first book in the series quite a bit. It was one of my favorites the year I read it, which was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Oops. I love the show. I started watching the show like a while ago just because it was there, and I was like, I don't care if I haven't read the books yet. It's a sci-fi show. It doesn't matter. And then I was like, oh wait, the show is really amazing. I love these characters. I love this story. I went to read the books, so I'm still watching the show. I read the first book and it was so good, and like just having them. I bought them new, which I never do. So they're new and they're pretty, and like I need to read them all, but also like they're so new and lovely that I'm afraid to touch them and damage them. But yeah, I will read these at some point. They're more than 5 books. There's like 8 or 9 or something. But I'm so stoked on these. Like, I really want to read these because I don't do like big, like epic science fiction really ever. And for whatever reason, adore these books. Methland, The Death and Life of an American Small Town by Nick Redding. This is nonfiction about this one town in Iowa that's just been completely destroyed by the meth epidemic. And it's just a look at this one town and like what meth has done to it, basically. And it's kind of like about this one place, but kind of indicative of what's happening in a lot of places in America. And it sounds interesting. I don't really know anything about it, but interesting. The Effects of Light by Miranda Beverly Whitmore. What is this about? This doesn't even look familiar. Two sisters pose for a haunting series of photographs and throughout their child, many involving nudity. The photographs fire each girl's psyche with a sense of artistic accomplishment. I don't even know what that means. 13 years later, one of the sisters receives a mysterious communication. She flees the one man who's pressed her defenses. I don't know what this is about. I don't know what genre this is. Is this a thriller? It's drenched in luminous epiphany and unexpected truth. I don't understand what this is about. So, I picked it up. Apparently it looked good to me at the time, but nothing about this seems familiar to me, so... oh well. Hopefully it's really good. It seems like it might be. It's just one of those books that, like, you can't tell literally anything from it from the description. It just doesn't really make sense. And then the final book in this haul, we're like 2.5 hours in at this point. At least in like raw footage time. I'm hoping to get this down to like an hour and a half, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army by Jeremy Scahill. Also, I'm sorry about the noise outside. I have the world's thinnest windows and there's nothing I can do. I'm not waiting because this has been like 3 hours of my life almost. This is just about Blackwater, which is a private military company, and especially in Iraq. But it's just in general about Blackwater and like that it's essentially a bad thing, I think is the takeaway from this book, which like for sure. It's kind of sketch that like we just have private militaries in America that are just for sale. Like, that's concerning. It's one of those things that it's really nice to pretend it doesn't exist, but I don't know anything about it in like detail, so I feel like this book might be worthwhile, but it is like 500 pages long. Oh, but half of that is like afterward and notes. Okay, so like it's still thick though, but potentially not my thing usually, but it seems like an interesting topic that I would like to learn more about, so we'll make it my thing at least for this. And that was 110 books. I've been sitting on the floor for 2 hours. Everything hurts. Spleen has actually just worn herself out attacking things, and she's just unconscious over there living her best life. And I'm so glad to be done. This is all the books that I've bought. Well, this and the other video. All the books that I've bought in like the last 2 years or acquired or whatever, which I think in total was something close to like 170 or 180. I buy books to self-soothe sometimes. And I did a lot of self-soothing apparently in the last 2 years. But let me know if you have thoughts on any of these. Links to all the booktubers I mentioned will be down below, as always. If you actually sat through this entire video, be kind to yourself. Don't do that again. This was unnecessary. This video is too long. I'm sorry. If you're still here, I'm really sorry. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon with a shorter and more watchable video. We hope. In case you're wondering, this is what my tiny spleen is doing. And this is why I kept pausing to say, oh, she's so cute. Because what could be cuter than this tiny sleeping spleen?